how can people begin to attract the life that they want?
To bring abundance into your life, you have to be cultivating an abundant mindset. And so a really easy way to start is to list the things that you're grateful for that you already have. And as part of attracting things into your life or manifestation, imagine it being true. Imagine what it would look like, feel like, smell like. And then when you have that vision in your mind, give gratitude for it becoming true. So then it sets you on a path of, I'm grateful for the things that I've got. These are the things that I want. And you're staying positive and abundant and grateful, and that's much more likely to attract those good things into your life.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with the Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because I need them for me, because I want to wake up every day and watch a video that puts me in a mindset to believe in myself more and go off and accomplish amazing things and attack the day. And I hope that this video does that for you as well. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Dr. Swart Bieber, and my take on her top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2 is consume information mindfully.
That most of the neuroscientists that I know, all the ones I know personally and other ones that I've heard of, don't watch the news or read newspapers.
That's powerful.
And it's not because we don't want to be informed, because obviously we do manage to stay informed in other ways of important events around the world. But if you just look at the nature of news, the proportion of it that is bad news and the impact that that has on your brain is disproportionate. So the first thing is to curate your news feeds, your social media feeds, so that you're not getting bombarded with so much bad news, and you balance that out for yourself. Of course, life can be hard. So yes, you have to be resilient as well. But the first thing is to take charge of what you're actually feeding your brain. And that's everything from your diet to information.
Rule number 3 is visualize.
If I could give people a takeaway to start with that's really simple, but it doesn't mean there isn't a lot of hard work at the other end of it, it would be very clear on what it is that you want. So you've mentioned a few things. Spend 5 minutes sitting down and visualizing those things being true, and then give gratitude for that. That would be my first step.
Give gratitude for
those things being true. Just 5 minutes. I'm a great partner. I'm not messy. My podcast is super successful. Like, see it, feel it in your body, taste it in your mouth, hear it in your ears. Completely immerse yourself in that for 5 minutes, longer if you can. And then just be so grateful for all of that. Essentially what you're doing is moving your brain from a fear state to a trust state. And that is the gateway to making these changes.
Rule number 4 is eliminate negative thoughts.
What are some steps that somebody can take to begin to rewire some of these negative thought patterns, whether it's I'm not enough, this is never going to happen, I'm not good enough, so that they can have their actions aligned with their thoughts?
Great question. And, there is a lot of that negative self-talk around. And it's important to understand for a start that that's normal, that everybody has that kind of thought, or periods of time where they may have more of those types of thoughts. And it's quite hard when you're already in that negative spiral to really try to turn it around. I do want to get back to resilience in a while, because your podcast is called The Adversity Advantage. So we should also speak about what to do when it feels like nothing's happening or things have gone wrong. But let's say, it's a regular day, and sometimes it crosses your mind that kind of, goal is not going to happen for you. It doesn't happen to people like me, or that's for kind of, other people. So when you have a recurring negative thought, there's usually a very firmly held belief underneath it that drives that thought. So, it could be to do with worthiness, deservingness. And so it's important for people to kind of dig underneath the recurring negative thought and ask themselves, what is it that I must believe about myself to keep having that thought? And often it's very non-conscious, because it may come from childhood, and that pathway's been there for so long that you're not even aware of it. If you can do the journaling or the therapy or the self-reflection to understand what the belief is that's driving your thought, then you can create a positive affirmation or a mantra that's the opposite statement to that belief. And you can repeat that every time you have the thought, so that you're basically trying to overwrite that pathway in your brain with this new, more positive thought. And that's an interesting one, because in the brain, you can't undo what's already wired in there. You have to overwrite it or replace it with something that you'd prefer.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is build neuroplasticity.
How does someone build neuroplasticity in the brain? And then how does someone attempt to do that in these times? What are the best ways? And
well, I mean, in a way, what we've been through in the year is an opportunity to build neuroplasticity. I mean, I know there was a sort of argument online kind of last March or April, which was that there were a lot of people saying, okay, I'm going to have a few months off and I'm going to start up a new business, or I'm going to learn a new language. And some people were very angry about this because it, put a lot of pressure on people to do new things and not just do the minimum, or not just kind of, do what they had to survive. And I was very much in that camp. I said, this is not the time to learn something new or try to change your brain. It's the time to use the fact that hopefully you've done things to build resilience in your brain already, and you're going to use that up now, basically. So for me, it happened a bit accidentally. So I kind of took up opportunities. And I think for a good 3 months or so, I didn't do anything new. I just did what I had to. And I actually dialed down and made it I'm not going to do more than what I really have to. And then it became sort of spring, summer in the UK. And my husband really wanted to play tennis, and he's much better than me. So we decided we would buy one of these tennis ball machines that throws the ball at you so that he could play by himself. And I left it too late, so they'd all been sold out. So I sort of reluctantly said, I'll come to the court with you, but you're going to have to give me lessons because I'm just no way as good as you. And then I experienced that absolute rush of neuroplasticity, just seeing yourself getting better at something each time. And, sort of seeing that progress. And it was because it was physical. It felt more like neuroplasticity in progress than like when I learned a language and I have to say my cooking has massively improved in the last year as well. And it's, not out of choice. I've cooked 3 meals a day for most of a year. So I think seeing those little opportunities of where you've made changes and what you have become better at, and focusing on that rather than necessarily thinking, I'm going to take on some new learning. But like I always say, a new language or a musical instrument are the best things. And I've had a piano keyboard. I'm ashamed to say it was my Christmas present the year before last, and it's been gathering dust. And so I was saying on sort of social media and stuff that I'd love to learn it, but obviously now I can't get a teacher, in your home or whatever. And then somebody told me about this app called Flowkey, and it's completely changed my life. It's amazing. So you just use the app on your phone. It tells you what to do on the piano. It listens back to what you play. And, that's been really wonderful too. But I think the message here is that it's so important to go with what you actually want to do that's enjoyable, rather than forcing yourself to try to create neuroplasticity in your brain, because actually then it just has the opposite effect.
Rule number 6 is overcome your addictions.
What would be some addictions, habits, behaviors that people are suffering from today that is an example of this?
Yeah, so I like the way you framed that as not good or bad. We could say positive or negative, or, just productive, non-productive. And so through my work, which is very varied. So, I work with executives, mostly in financial services. I teach at MIT Sloan. I work with a very different demographic through my social media and through, people that read my book and listen to my podcast. But I see the same issues surfacing across the board. And this is based on the dopaminergic pathways in the brain, which are related to motivation. So motivation is the neurological mechanism that makes us seek something that's good for us. But motivation and addiction are on a spectrum. So something that used to be good for us, if we overdo it or we're doing it and somehow it's starting to actually not have the same effect, so we have to do more of a certain action to get the same reward, that can become destructive. And obviously drugs and alcohol are examples of that everyone will understand. But I'm talking about things like being a workaholic, so working excessive hours, over-exercising, particularly in a really high-intensity way that actually creates more cortisol and stress in the body. So basically screen time. And the story that I hear with this is it's really important in my job to be responsive. I always reply to emails straight away and I get rewarded for that. And then that can, at the other end of the spectrum, be I'm constantly scrolling social media. I'm working across time zones. I'm looking at my phone in the middle of the night. So you can see with all of those things how, having a good work ethic is great, but working excessive hours and damaging your health and your relationships isn't.
Rule number 7 is follow your intuition.
Intuition is the lessons that you've picked up along the way that you're not conscious of, but they're still stored in your nervous system. And so the less conscious you are of them, the deeper they're pushed into the nervous system. So there's a process called Hebbian learning, named after the neuroscientist Donald Hebb. And that is, it's basically, neurons that fire together, wire together, but it's that the things that you've learned today, like things that you've learned by speaking with me, that's going to be very front of mind and kind of just in like little pathways that are just kind of connecting up with each other. But stuff that you learned when you were 5, like when you put your hand in a fire and it burnt you and you never ever want to do that again, that's deep down. You're not really conscious of that, but and other things maybe that you don't recall. So we believe that that wisdom gets pushed from the outer cortex into the limbic system, which is the emotional system of the brain, into the brainstem, into the spinal cord, and into the gut neurons. And that's why they sometimes call it gut instinct, because it's that feeling of knowing something but not knowing why you know it. But it's actually to do with the fact that you have wisdom and experience that is, it's embodied in you, but you're not conscious of it necessarily.
Rule number 8 is be optimistic.
You were talking about patience and, consistency is key to changing and growing. But that, people have setbacks or they default to their old ways of behaving. And it's also important to say that that's normal. And if that happens, that doesn't mean you should give up, but it just means you have to start again. So instead of wasting time beating yourself up about the fact that you didn't go to the gym or do the thing that you were going to do, just give yourself a bit of a break and then start over again with whatever that process is. And so you've now asked a question about something bigger than that, which is that, someone's really in a bad place. Life is not good. And the feeling I got when you were talking, giving examples of that situation is one of the worst feelings in the world is when you feel like you can't trust yourself anymore. You can't trust your intuition or you can't trust your ability to get yourself out of these difficult situations.
Rule number 9 is practice meditation.
What are some ways that people can start meditating if it's something that they've never tried?
Well, the easiest way to start, if you've never tried, is to use one of these apps. So there are apps like Headspace, Calm, Buddhify, and many, many more. Unplug. So find one that you like. If you like the voice of the person, that helps. Just put your earphones in and listen to the voice for 10 minutes and just kind of, let them guide you. It took me 9 or 10 months of doing that before I could do it without the app. So, it does take some time. But then if you don't want to use an app, because let's say you're choosing not to use technology, then do something like I said, focusing on your breath is one, and maybe just counting how long your breaths are and trying to make the inhale and the exhale pretty equal. Otherwise, you can do open monitoring of your thoughts, which is just sit quietly for 10 minutes and just see what thoughts come into your mind and just let them come and go. You can also do intentional mind wandering. So you can just sit down and ask yourself a what if question and then just let your mind go in all different directions. Or you can do focused attention, which is picking a sound or an object and just focusing on that. The thing I'm really into at the moment is Vedic meditation, which is use of a mantra. And, there's evidence that a lot of very successful executives use Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation. And that's like the most effective for mental health and brain performance. But personally, I think, mindfulness is an umbrella term, and meditation is one of the things that falls under that, like yoga. One of the things I've really cultivated in this last year, and, like you said, there's time for introspection. Also, we're just stuck at home most of the time, is creating a patchwork quilt of mindfulness throughout my whole day. So I do my Vedic meditation first thing in the morning when I wake up, like in bed. But then throughout the day, I do mindful eating. If I go outside, I do mindful walking. I do yoga as well. And then when it's kind of meal times or just, wind down time in the evening, and throughout the day, actually, I'm really, really conscious of paying attention to my loved ones. So even if I'm in the middle of a really important email and my husband walks in, whereas before I would have been like, I'm in the middle of something and he's interrupting me, I always say to myself now, okay, what is the most important thing? Is this email more important than your marriage? So I stop in the middle of the email and I turn and I pay my full attention, and I'm not holding my phone at the same time, and I'm not thinking about other things at the same time. So with that, you find that you're actually doing a lot of mindfulness through the day, and it's just a matter of building those things up and kind of, being very aware that that's your intention, is to be mindful.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is spend time in nature.
I spent many years working on mental resilience with people. And emotional regulation was part of that. And that became important again in the pandemic because we were in like close quarters with people, and, and it was just very different, and it was hard, and there was homeschooling and working and everything. What I've seen some of the good things that I've seen as a result of the pandemic is that we've definitely appreciated again the importance of our time in nature. So I think most of us felt that, being able to get out and be somewhere green was really important. And because there was like no planes and no traffic, we could see the stars in the sky again. We saw amazing sunsets. People began to appreciate birdsong. And now the studies are showing that time spent in nature actually has a really positive impact on your physical health, your mental health, and your longevity. So, that's one good thing that's come out of it. But are we all still, making time for that, or are we just going back to kind of our old ways? A strong negative motivator gets us into action. Sometimes a really strong positive one will do that too, but not as strongly as a negative motivator. So I'm thinking, for example, when I had my wedding come up and I wanted to look a certain way and for the whole wedding to feel a certain way, I did a lot of things I wouldn't normally do to try to make sure that happened, but that was unusual. And I remember thinking then, okay, this is a really positive motivator, but most of the time we do things to avoid a perceived loss, or we do things because things have gone wrong for us and we need to try to make it better. And actually that is very explained by science, because one of the strongest gearings of our brain from evolution is called loss avoidance. And the brain is 2 to 2.5 times as primed to avoid loss as it is to get a reward.
What does the neuroscience or evidence say around why journaling is legit?
Yeah, so at the very minimum, it's like a download of your emotions. And so with your, any emotions, negative thoughts, unfinished tasks, if you keep them in your brain body system by just thinking about them in your mind, then you actually increase your cortisol levels, and cortisol correlates with stress. So it's like a pressure cooker building up. If you speak it out loud, write it out into a journal, or do physical exercise and literally sweat out some of that cortisol, then you're releasing those negative emotions, negative thought patterns, anxieties, worries about the future from your brain body system. But and I'd love to know if you've done this or not. I had an insight which I just stumbled across by myself, but it really makes sense, obviously, from the neuroplasticity point of view, is that if you go back and read over your journal, you see your thought process laid out in front of you. You see your patterns of behavior. You see like your decision making, tools, whether it's more logical or more intuitive. You see what you've written about your relationships with people, and seeing that in your own handwriting, or, you know, even if it's been synced up and typed out for you, just seeing, knowing that it's your words and what you've thought and what you've said, you can't run away from that. So it can be like so insightful and enlightening. And I've had that definitely with all of that stuff like emotions and thought patterns and intuition. But I also had it when I used to go to Boston twice a year to teach at MIT. And I remember with the travel and the jet lag, just feeling that I was having these small muscular twitches, and it was noticeable in bed at night. And I decided to read back over, not for that reason, but just anyway, I decided to read back over my journal from 6 months earlier when I was last in Boston. And I'd written in my journal, I'm getting these little muscular twitches. And so I worked out that I'd become magnesium deficient by flying. And so I basically, hence why I was carrying so many bottles of things with me when I was traveling, really upped my dose of magnesium for the trips, and it never happened again.
Oh, wow.
And if I hadn't read back, I would never have put 2 and 2 together. I would have thought it was just happening now and it hadn't happened before.
75% of the brain is made up of water, and of the solid matter, 60% is made up of fat. So the focus should be on good fats and hydrating foods in your diet. So that's like oily fish if you eat fish, eggs if you eat eggs, and then avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oils, obviously leafy greens, but particularly hydrating foods like cucumber, melon. And then the best foods for your brain are dark-skinned foods. So like beets, black beans, eggplant. And the good news is that dark chocolate over 80% and organic coffee count in that too, because in the skins of dark foods, there's something called anthocyanins, which are really strong antioxidants that support your brain, protect it from inflammation, but also support growth of new cells. So I just try to eat as many of those things as I can. Also because of the gut-brain connection, fermented foods, so like kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. And then, you know, just eating around that, the sort of right proportion of protein, fat, and carbs. So just not too much carbs, but some whole grains you need to make serotonin, for example. The hydration equation is 1/2 liter of water for every 30 pounds of your body weight. So you need to work out what that ideal number is and then see where you're at the moment. And if there's a big gap, just increase it by 1 glass of water per day over a sort of, 1 to 2 week period. Otherwise, you're going to notice you're going to the bathroom a lot more.
The sort of the intentionality of what you do. So you can do the same thing. Like, okay, so intermittent fasting is a great example. There's a huge difference between people who say, oh, I forget to eat breakfast, and people who eat like me, which is only between 12 noon and 8 p.m. every day, because of the intention. It actually has a different effect on your body. Yeah.
So it's like your body's like burning more because you're intentionally doing that, or you're losing more weight or something?
I won't go so far as to say it's burning more or you're losing more weight, but again, in neuroscience, there's a difference between intentional mind wandering and just slipping off into daydreaming. And so if you slip off into daydreaming, that means your attention isn't the best. And it's actually kind of a bad sign in terms of your focus and your concentration. But if you intentionally let your mind wander, then actually that leads to more creative thinking.
The longer we have been experiencing something, the more deeply entrenched it is in our brain. And that's why the neural pathways that relate to things like the values that we hold, the roles that we play in our family and social circle, how boundaried we are or not, the expectations that we place on ourselves, and the secrets that we keep, can be so deeply embedded in the neural architecture of our brains that we're not really aware of how much they drive our behaviour. So essentially, these are subconscious or non-conscious beliefs that drive our thinking processes and then drive the actions that we take in the real world. The good news is that through neuroplasticity, you can choose sustainable new behaviours that will overwrite those old neural pathways that you have in your brain. It's important to remember that neuroplasticity can work for good or for bad. So you also need to be so mindful of what you're exposing your brain to. Everything you see on the TV, read in the news, the people that you meet, and the emotions that you experience and the thoughts that you let go round and round in your brain. Now, there's a process for embedding sustainable behavior change in your brain, and that starts with raised awareness. So you really have to bring from non-conscious to conscious what it is that's driving your behaviors and thinking processes at the moment. You can do that through meditation, journaling, therapy, or just talking to good friends. Once you've identified what might be holding you back from success, what barriers you may be placing in front of yourself, or just old patterns of thinking and behavior that no longer serve you, you can start to focus attention on certain situations or relationships where these behaviors tend to show themselves up. At first, it's important just to notice where you could have done something differently, rather than jumping straight into action. Once you've spent some time reflecting on this, and you have a few good examples of ways that you think or behave that you'd like to change, you can start the third step of deliberate practice, which is choosing a new way of behaving, or choosing a new thought or positive affirmation or mantra that you can use to overwrite old, unhelpful thought patterns, and then deliberately practicing these actions and thoughts until they become so strongly embedded in your brain that they become the default pathway for your brain to send energy along. The more you repeat something and the more emotional intensity there is associated with it, the more likely the neurons are to wire together and form new neural pathways that make you the new you and give you the best life that you can have. And this is really from the root level up. It's not superficial behavior change. It's changing the way that you now do things. The final part of that process is about accountability. We all have so many good intentions, but we don't always see them through. And that's why an app like Living Ashram or a buddy that you're going through this behavior change process with really helps you to be much more successful than if you just have vague thoughts about changing a way of being or acting. The evidence from really committing to a behavior change like this is so strong that even the field of research around epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment on your genes, shows that if you think in a different way, act in a new way, give up lifestyle behaviors that are actually holding you back from being the best self that you can be, things like stress, smoking, drinking, not exercising, eating badly, that you can actually change the expression of your genes. So we all have parts of our genes that can be switched on or off. So even if we have certain likelihoods of getting certain diseases or living to a certain age, through our thoughts and our behaviors, we can change some of those outcomes. Pretty incredible. One way to approach this is through positive visualization. So you can visualize yourself healthy and well, and you can really take that to the core of you and see yourself exhibiting these good behaviors and visualize the outcome that that would have for you in the future. Another way of priming your brain to make sure that you stay accountable to these goals that you really want to reach is to create what I call an action board. Now, this is like a vision board. It's a collage of images, metaphorical or literal, that represent all the things that you really want in life. But the scientific part says that you also have to take goal-orientated action towards making these things come true. You can't just sit at home and fantasize about them coming true. So if you create an action board, you look at it every day, you visualize it coming true, and you take the actions, whether it's from the brain-body connection actions that you committed to, or something to do with a longer, more sustainable behavior change, and you keep doing them, you'll see the results rolling in. And this really comes back to Living Ashram's motto of root level up, whole human approach to health, wealth and well-being. So it's about really committing and seeing that through in every aspect of your body, your thoughts, your emotions, and your spirit. I try to do the right things about sleep and everything else, but I don't get stressed about it if I can't.
Yeah.
So that's a really big thing for me. You know, I try to eat right. I try to remember to take my supplements. I journal when I can. I meditate when I can. But if I don't do it, then I don't get stressed. I would say that is a really big learning for me. I think that's a really big tip. I would also say it's better to change 10 things by 1% than try to change one thing by 10%. So work on micro tweaks to your routine, like go to bed half an hour earlier, do a digital detox over one weekend, drink a bit more water than you normally do, try to increase your steps by 1,000 to 2,000 per day for a week and see what happens. So for small things like that build up, because you start to feel better, your brain becomes more powerful, and then you're able to do, you know, some of the bigger goals that you may have been saving up. In the last 25 years or so, we have had much more sophisticated brain scanning technology, which shows how the brain works. Prior to that, we really understood a lot of how the brain works from seeing what happens when it goes wrong. So if somebody has a stroke or a brain tumor or a brain injury. Once we could scan healthy brains, we started to learn a lot more about this concept of neuroplasticity, which is that the brain grows and changes throughout life. Now, you've got two little girls, so you will know that from 0 to 2, they went from being completely vulnerable and helpless to walking, talking, being able to control their bladder and bowels, and, you know, maybe even speaking several languages and having an opinion. So it's a massive burst of neuroplasticity. And we see that, you know, very visibly in young children. Around the teenage years, there's some pruning of the brain to sophisticate it for adulthood, for sexual behavior, for emotional and social interaction. And that is quite an active process till we're about 25. We used to think it stopped when we physically stopped growing around the age of 18. But the really interesting area for us in manifestation and the laws of attraction is that from 25 to 65, you can do things that keeps your brain more plastic or flexible, and you can change the ways that you think, feel, and act. So to me, neuroplasticity underlies manifestation, and it's a 4-step process. It starts with raised awareness. So you need to know what you want to bring into your life or how you want your life to look or feel. Then it's focused attention, which is noticing maybe, you know, negative thinking or certain behaviors or relationship patterns that are holding you back from getting what you want. And also noticing opportunities to get the things that you want, but really just building up your database of, okay, that doesn't work for me. When I do this, then, you know, good things come into my life. The third part is deliberate practice. So that is going out there and doing the things that you need to manifest the things that you want into your life.
Got to do the work.
Got to do the work, totally. And the fourth part isn't really like a step in the process, but it's accountability, because it's very easy to start, particularly in New Year, and say, okay, these are all my resolutions and new things that I'm going to do. And then for most of us, that motivation doesn't, you know, remain. Partly from the neuroscience, that's because we tend to pick goals that are too big, and it's better to break them down into bite-sized chunks. And that's the same for manifestation. Take small steps towards the things that you want. So if there are some things that are more in your control, like getting fit and healthy, then start doing that. And then if there's something that's less in your control, like getting married or having a baby, then give that a bit longer, but know that you are changing your brain by changing your behaviors. And, you know, have some form of accountability, whether it's a vision board, whether it's your partner, whether it's a therapist.
Abundance is basically about thinking positively. It's about believing that the world is a good place, that there's enough out there for everyone, that we're not in competition for resources, and that if somebody else does well, that doesn't mean badly for us. That if we give something to someone or help someone with something, that's a good thing, that it generates more positivity, and that somehow, you know, that will come back to you at some point. And interestingly, it correlates to the strongest gearing of the brain that we have for our survival as a species, which is called loss aversion.
Yes.
So that means that the psychological effect of avoiding loss is about twice as powerful as the psychological effect of the equivalent gain or reward. And the easiest way to explain that is if you walked from the parking lot to your studio this morning and you found $50 on the floor on your way in, you'd be probably pleasantly surprised that you found $50. You might keep it, you might give it to charity. But by the time you're in the studio and you've started thinking about recording, you would have forgotten about that $50. If you walked from your car across the parking lot and realized by the time you got to the studio that you'd lost $50 out of your pocket, you'd be mad at yourself. You'd go back out to the parking lot to see if you could find it. You might even go back out there more than once to check. And you might still be thinking about that at the end of the day. So that's just an example of how the same loss or gain has more powerful effect if we lose. And so psychologically, anything like feeling excluded or isolated or treated unfairly or feeling like you don't have the same opportunities as somebody else has that really strong effect on your brain. And so we have to work doubly hard to go against that, because it is something that helped us to survive in evolution, but I was going to say it's not helpful in the modern world, but to be honest, I will say it's not a way to live a life. It's a very, because I believe the way you think determines your life. If you believe that everybody's out there in competition, there isn't enough out there for everyone, that you've got to fight to get your bit, that would just be such a sad way to live.
You mentioned nature and looking at the stars and stuff. What's inherently good about nature?
Yeah, so this has really come up as a big one in the last few years. And I'm not sure if it's coincidental with the pandemic and having been locked up or locked up, but also had more opportunity to maybe commune with nature than we did in our hectic lifestyles before. But the brain benefits of time spent in nature are massive. And whenever I'm asked a question that I don't necessarily factually know the answer to straight away, I always take it back to evolution. There's a reason that our brains were wired in a certain way. And when we first became, Homo sapiens, we walked on the savannah. We walked in the land. We ate what we could hunt, fish, or harvest. And so our relationship with nature was, we were dependent on it, but it was also a huge threat to us, floods, storms, fires. It's a symbiotic relationship. And what we've done through agriculture and construction is just move ourselves further and further away from that. And even if you just think of one super scientific example of that, is that the quality and diversity of our gut flora has diminished so much since we lived in the cave. It's reduced by, I don't want to get the number wrong, but it's a shocking factor, hundreds. And agriculture's contributed to that. Antibiotics have contributed to that. Obviously antibiotics save lives, and, it's been an amazing advance for us as humans. But, the fact that we eat food that's not as diverse as it used to be, that we don't necessarily eat those natural things, the prebiotic and probiotic foods and supplements that allow our gut bacteria to flourish, and we eat so much processed food, and that stress, alcohol, and antibiotics will damage our gut microbiome. That's one of the huge consequences of having moved away from nature. And people ask all sorts of questions that we don't know all the answers to yet about why do we have more diseases like ME, like MS, like autism, like ADD. And some of the answers lie in that disconnection from nature and what that's done to how that's shaped our bodies and our brains.
Right.
And how we live as a result of that. Just take 1 minute to look at a leaf or a petal or a squirrel or something that's close up right in front of you in great detail. And then take 1 minute to look at a really large tree or building or a cloud in the distance and just see how that resets your nervous system. So there's a couple of, that's basically taking yourself away from sharp focus to a wide vista, which is part of like living in nature and on the savannah, is that we love having an uninterrupted view of the horizon. It's really restful for the brain.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then as well as like 10 deep breaths, you can just do like, you can do a sharp intake of breath and just do like a really long sigh as well. That's a nice little way to reset your nervous system.
Can we spend a moment on sleep posture?
Yeah, of course. I actually did a reel for you on Instagram. Yeah. And I was saying that the best position for cleaning out your brain overnight, which is a very active, forcible flushing process of getting rid of the sort of toxins that build up through the wear and tear of daily life, and this process takes 7 to 8 hours, is lying on your side. So basically left or right side, but that's better than lying on your front or your back. And it's something to do with the positioning of the vessels in your neck. So basically the fluid that the brain sits in, which also is, there are ventricles in the brain, that forces toxins out overnight. And if your head is to the side, then it's easier to expel them. It's called the glymphatic system in the brain, but basically it goes into your lymphatic system and then gets expelled from your body. Yeah. So I've actually,
I love it.
Yeah.
Side sleeping.
Yeah. I have a special pillow that makes me sleep on my side.
Oh, really? What is it?
It's a temporal memory foam pillow that's got a ridge so that it fits nicely into the side of your head and neck and shoulder.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag Believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from Mindy Pelz, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
What has been so fascinating to me in just researching fasting and watching the application of it is that I don't know why it's taking us till 2023 to realize that we have two metabolisms.